ready, we'll go ahead and get this started.
Sure. Yep.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Tom Sargent. I'm from the IAOM office, and I'll be your host on this final product showcase meeting today. I'd like to thank each of you for being here. Because of this great turnout and a large audience, we do ask that you keep your audio muted during the presentation and use the chat room option for your questions. I'll be reviewing the chat room and sharing your questions at the end. You'll also have an opportunity to ask your question directly to Dylan at the end of the presentation. If you aren't able to stay on for the entire session, we will be recording this and making it available through the IAOM website later this week on our education page. If you do not wish to appear in the video, I recommend that you disable your webcam. Today's presenter, Dylan Phillips, will be speaking to you about Bratney's Dante Wheat Scrubbing Technology. The Dante Wheat Scrubbing Technology decreases microbial count, toxin levels, chemical residue, and tempering time using OMAS dry scrubbing technology. The system utilizes unique flow placement along with upgrades to traditional scouring, debranding technologies to increase flour safety, reduce wheat ash, and improve overall performance of the mill while maintaining or improving flour performance. Dylan, I guess the floor is all yours.
Thank you, Tom. I want to thank everybody for joining us today. Hope everyone's well and staying safe out there. I also want to again thank Tom and the IAOM for arranging these webinars. As you mentioned, I'm Dylan Phillips with Bratney Companies. We're located in Des Moines, Iowa. We are exclusive partners here in North America with OMAS Industries. They are located just outside Padova, Italy, which is in the northern region of Italy, just west of Venice, about an hour. For those of you that aren't familiar with OMAS, they have been manufacturing milling equipment since 1966, and they've been manufacturing milling equipment under the OMAS name since the late 90s. Today I'm going to talk to you about OMAS dry scrubbing technology. And what is dry wheat scrubbing? Well, we describe it as gently removing small amounts of the pericarp using abrasion to eliminate surface impurities and enable the kernel to absorb water more efficiently and homogeneously. So here on the picture on the right, you can see some of the bran and fines that have been removed from the wheat kernel with the scrubbing system. The process objective is not to remove too much bran, just the harmful impurities that may be on the outside of the kernel, and small amounts of the bran, small amounts of that pericarp layer. Just to touch on a few of the wheat scrubbing advantages, reduced tempering time, reduced bacteria count. It also reduces the herbicide and pesticide residue on the outside of the kernel, as well as reducing the ash content of the wheat, and also aids in higher milling efficiency. So by removing a small amount of that bran, it lightens the load slightly on your primary breaks and your sifter sections, just making that mill slightly more efficient and effective. The general operating principle, as you can see here, the red arrow indicates the product inlet. The blue arrows, especially the 4 arrows up here, indicate your false air inlets, and the other blue arrow here at a right angle indicates the forced air, so there's a fan that's attached here on the side that forces air into the machine. The gray arrows indicate the direction of the abrasive discs, so that's they can move either direction. They don't go back and forth or turn in one direction, but over time you could reverse those to possibly extend the life on the discs. The brown arrow there indicates the bran and fines outlet. So the bran outlet there is aided by, you'll hook up an external ventilation fan along with a cyclone or small filter that creates a negative suction on the machine, which I'll detail a little more later. And then the green arrow down at the right indicates the wheat outlet after it's been through the working chamber of the machine. Taking a closer look at some of the mechanical features, here's a closer look at the inlet portion of the machine. So it has just over a 6.5-inch inlet at the top. The product is distributed into the working or scrubbing chamber of the machine with an inverted cone. That is a fixed inverted cone, and it, as I said, distributes that product evenly throughout and around that machine. These blue arrows indicate the false air inlets I was speaking about. One at the top here and one on this head section right here. That just gives you two options to help balance the airflow on that machine. It also has the 10 horsepower fixed fan that is mounted on the machine. So this fan is blowing air into the machine. It actually blows air internally into the rotor, which then blows that air out in between the abrasive discs on that machine. So it helps force that bran and the fines through the screens on the machine to exit out. The green arrow here indicates a grease zerk, just so you can easily grease that machine without having to take anything off or apart, and makes it easy for your preventative maintenance program there. On to more of the actually working chamber. As I mentioned, it has 8 abrasive discs. The product is flowing from top to bottom. The 8 abrasive discs are surrounded by these perforated screens, and that allows the bran and dust to exit the machine while the wheat continues to go down and get scrubbed until it reaches the outlet. These perforated screens are surrounded by inner doors. One of those doors you can slightly see here on the picture on the right-hand side. So those doors surround the screens all the way around, creating a channel for that bran to exit the machine. And then you can't see them on these pictures, but the outer doors enclose the working chamber of the machine. So there's hinged outer doors that you can open to gain access to that internal portion. Moving on to the detail of the outlet. So once the wheat has been through all the discs, it hits this product outlet here. The product flow is controlled by a gate right here that pivots back and forth. That is also controlled by the actuator that you see down here on this picture. The fines outlet, as I mentioned, it's indicated as brown arrow. So that can be located on one of any 3 positions. So you can put it on this side. You could have your fines outlet on the left-hand side and put your product outlet here, or there is also an opening on the back side of the machine. So based on the facility layout, what position those would be best suited for, but it's easily adjustable. The bladed impeller here, shown by the green arrow, that helps aid in the bran removal. So as I mentioned, there is a negative suction created on this machine by the external fan, but this impeller also helps push that bran out of the machine to keep things moving. Depending on the capacity required, typically we have a 50 or a 75 horsepower motor on there. The 50 horse motor is going to get up to maybe 8 tons per hour in that range at about 0.5% bran removal. And the 75 horsepower can get up to 15 tons per hour at that 0.5%. So all depends on how much removal you want and what capacity you're looking at. Sorry, didn't mean to go forward there. On the right-hand side, you can see a little more detail of the outlet gate. here, shown by number 3. Number 4, which you can't see in detail, that just shows the hinge assembly for that gate. Number 5 is the inductive sensors, so that's going to tell you the position of that gate and display that on the operating panel. And then number 6 is the actuator that controls the opening and closing of that gate. On to the machine controls. So number 1, if you push that button, that is the trend. So that will show you a graphical representation of the historical amp consumption. So it provides you a trend of your amp usage over time. Number 2 is just where you set your parameters. Number 3 is where it will tell you what your current amp consumption, your real-time amp consumption is. Number 4 is where you have that setting. So the hold time in the machine is controlled by an ammeter, so on the amps on the drive motor. And the user can set that up. It can, whether it's 40 amps, 45 amps, but once you determine the right amount of bran removal for your and the right amount of scrubbing for your process, you associate that with the amps, and then you can enter those amps into that control panel, into those parameters. And then that machine will automatically open and adjust that gate to maintain that correct level of amperage, so you get a nice, even, homogeneous product coming out of the outlet. Number 5 is going to show you the status of the door, so just if it's open, closed. Number 6 here shows you the machine status, so if the machine is running, if the machine is stopped. There's also a manual mode, so you can switch back and forth between manual and automatic. And then if you're in manual mode, you can open and close the gate by the push buttons here, shown by numbers 8 and 9. And then number 10 is, it's also just another indication of your door position. So it will tell you how open or how closed it is, in terms of a percentage. So Siemens is the standard PLC or HMI that's on the machine, but other options are available upon request. On to the installation. So the installation is maybe a little different than you may have seen in the past. We install the Dante in first cleaning after the destoner and before the color sorter. So by installing the machine prior to tempering, we remove mold and bacteria that could potentially create problems in tempering or further on in the process. And by removing those surface impurities on the dry wheat, we're able to really control the amount of bran and pericarp that's removed, so it can be as little or as much as you want. And it results in a cleaner and more hygienic wheat going to first break. As you can see here, and I mentioned, and we'll see a video of it here in a few slides, but the installation also requires a cyclone, airlock, or a small filter, and then a fan to help suck that bran out of there. So we'll have a video that what that installation looks like in a production environment. So on to the little more, covered most of this, but just to go a little more into the process, as I mentioned, that the abrasive discs work gently on the product. So it's available in different grit sizes. If you want something that's really gentle, we can provide that. If you want to be a little more aggressive, we can make that a little more coarse. But the product does move vertically from top to bottom. Again, we kind of target that 0.5% of bran removal. You can do more or less if you so choose. That's all determined by the hold time in the scrubbing chamber, and also the gap between the stones and the screens, which is adjustable manually. it's also as you wear the stones over time, you can adjust those screens in to maintain the correct gap. Again, the attached fan that I showed earlier, it aids in the dust and fine removal, but it also helps cool the product, so you don't have any problems with getting the product too hot and having any issues from that perspective. And again, the product exits out the machine via this spout. As you can see here, there's a green little square. That's a inspection port with a removable door. So you can see product moving through there, as well as remove that door, which allows easy access to sample the product to make sure you're getting the right amount of scrubbing action on that wheat. So here's just a few short videos to show you kind of the accessories that are needed to install. This is the fan. Oh, sorry. This is the fan, the ventilation fan that's usually installed with the machine. These they have on VFDs to maintain if there's too much or not enough pressure. It'll open and close the gate on those. But you could have that manually as well. And this just be a few more seconds. So there would be potentially one fan per machine. But if your fan, if you wanted to run 2 machines off 1 fan, that's a possibility as well. This short video is going to show just this is a surge bin or bulk bin for the brand that you've removed, and then it will show the cyclone that they have, making that bran and air separation, and then they'll pull out a few samples as well. So this is in a mill in Italy where they've got a number of these machines installed. There's the cyclone and airlock separating the bran, pulling that out of the machine. In this particular application, I believe they're removing closer to 1% of the bran, and they're going to show some of it there. This mill has, they've done extensive testing with this machine at this mill. And I'll get into that here in a few more slides. So just a little more about the advantages. So as I mentioned, reduced temper time, depending on how much bran you remove, but if you're moving that 0.5% of bran or so, they're seeing up to 20% decreased temper time. And also a reduction in the amount of water that they're using, approximately 0.5%. By removing that outermost impenetrable layer of bran, they're seeing the water being absorbed more evenly on the entire surface of the kernel, which is aiding in less water usage and also more even absorption, so a quicker temper time. It adds to your cleaner tempering bins by removing all the impurities prior to temper. Seeing the ash reduction on the wheat by 2 to 4%. Again, it's depending on your amount of removal. It reduces the bacteria load by 50 to 75%. Chemical residues by 30%. And if there are any superficial mycotoxins that haven't made their way too deep into the kernel, it's very effective at removing those as well. By removing some of that outermost, the hardest bran there on the outside, it's going to extend the flute life on your brake rolls. And it also just adds an additional layer of food safety for your mill by removing some of that harmful stuff prior to temper and prior to getting that into your mill. It's just going to lead to a healthier product for the consumer. So this is the installation that I mentioned. Well, one of the installations, but this system's been tested extensively at a large mill in Italy, and what they saw there was a reduction in their temper time on some of their processes by 25%. They also noticed that they were getting a more homogeneous absorption and more consistent flower hydration. So even when the, maybe the humidity or temperature in the mill was changing, they didn't notice a change in the flower hydration as much. It was more consistent. They saw an improved flower color as well by removing some of that bran and some of that ash prior to the mill. They did not see any negative effects on baking characteristics. So this particular mill has a lab. They have a bake lab and just a lab where they run all kinds of tests, and they did not see any negative effects. In fact, the mill, or this particular location, this particular company, they liked the results so well with the Dante scrubbing system that they removed all of the traditional scouring type equipment and replaced all of their cleaning sections with the Dante. And that has amounted to about 20 or 22 machines, I think they have now. So they've converted everything over to this particular system. Just to give you, in closing, I guess, just to show you a little snapshot of, this is one of the ash curves they ran on some wheat from this particular mill. And as you can see here, the Dante wheat is in the orange, and the traditional is in the blue. And just the ash content on all the streams, or on the cumulative ash clear through the curve, was consistently less on the dry scrubbing technology compared to tradition. So that's all I have today for you on the Dante dry scrubbing system. I do have some additional information, as far as some of the baking and alveograph type information, more on the ash curve. If you want to get a hold of me, I'd be happy to talk it over with you, or provide that to you at some time. Feel free to get a hold of me. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Tom and open it up to questions.
All righty, thank you, Dylan. And yeah, we'll open it up to any questions now. Feel free to either post questions to the chat room and I'll read those back to Dylan, or you may also unmute your microphone and ask Dylan those questions directly. And again, at the end, if you have particular questions that you want to ask Dylan specific to your facility, feel free to stay on and do that. We will not record that part of the session. So if you have any questions, now is the time to ask. And I do have a few questions that came in, Dylan, to me.
Okay.
So I'll read some of those back to you, and we'll wait for your answers.
All right.
First one is, what is the expected amp consumption at 15 TPH?
So that would be the 75 horse motor. If you're running 15 tons per hour, removing about 0.5% of the bran, it would be in the 45 to 50 amp range is what you'd consume.
Alrighty, a little shy out there, but I think they'll probably start rolling in with more questions. Here is another one. How big is the machine and what are the dimensions?
It's a good question. The machine's about 80 inches long, and at its widest point is about 40 inches wide, so 3.5 foot, a little under, and then about 97 inches tall. And both the machine's the same size, just the motor size would change based on capacity.
All righty, next question for you. Do I hear somebody unmuting to ask a question? I guess not. I'll read this one to you. How much aspiration does the machine require?
That external aspiration is about 2,500 CFM. So if you did have a house system that had that extra capacity, you could probably integrate that in. But typically we provide those with the machine.
Okay. Another question, is the rotor speed fixed or adjustable?
The rotor speed is fixed. In terms of there's no, but we could install a VFD if you wanted that to be something you wanted to adjust. But standard is fixed.
Alrighty, that's all I'm seeing right now for questions. Oh, here we go. They're coming in now. Can you describe typical maintenance and a replace of wear type components?
I may have to get at, I mean, if you had a little more specific questions towards the maintenance, I'd have to look into that a little more. You know, I know I can tell you what they're seeing on the like the screen wear life. They're getting about 130,000 tons before they need to replace screens and the discs. You can just pull out, you know, single discs if you need to, or pull out the entire rotor. You know, other than the main bearings, and you have a belt and some pulleys, that, you know, the motor. So there's not an incredibly large amount of maintenance on the machine. So the grease points are easily accessible to keep good grease in the main bearings. So, but if you have more specific questions, I'd be happy to look into them for you.
And Bill, if you want to follow up your question there in the chat, we can, if you want to provide some more specifics, certainly feel free to. Any other questions out there? I don't see that any more have come in on the chat room. Again, you can unmute your microphone if you want and ask Dylan directly. We'll give it about another minute here to allow for people to type into the chat room box there.
One thing I'd mention too is that, you know, as we get back hopefully to more regular times and regular travel, we'd be happy to, if you're traveling to Europe or want to go specifically for this reason, we could take you to see them over there. We're currently working on installation here, hopefully in the near future in the U.S. So hopefully soon be able to take you here locally, stateside, to see it as well.
Alrighty, here's another question, Dylan. The scrubbing element is made of what? Any concerns of this disintegrating and finding its way together with the finished product?
You know, they're abrasive discs like you'd see in similar to a rice whitening application, or, you know, possibly a similar systems used in durum wheat, just with a few different, you know, grit size is different, the angle of the slotted screens is different, just the overall aggressiveness of it is different. So, I mean, I guess there's always that concern on these type of machines that are using the abrasive discs, but you know, no is the short answer, I guess. You know, there's going to be gradual wear, but as far as anything more than dust, I wouldn't have a concern.
Okay. Any other questions? I think probably most everybody would have had a chance to type there, Dylan, during your last answer. I don't see any other questions, so if that's all, I guess we can probably wrap this up. Dylan, I want to thank you for taking the time to be here today. We do really appreciate your efforts and professionalism.
Yeah, no, I want to thank you and thank everybody for attending again. I've appreciated the web series, and I thought it was next best thing to not being at the show. So
that's right. That's right. And if anybody does have any specific questions to your facility, do feel free to stay on and talk with Dylan for a few minutes. We'll stop the recording, so your conversations with him won't be part of that. Otherwise, I guess it's we're going to wrap up this product showcase series. I hope you all have valued the 6 presentations, and we do appreciate you being here. Remember, you can find all these events, excuse me, all these events recorded on the IOM website under the Education tab. Look for the product showcase listing there. If there are no other questions, and I don't see that any others have come in, we'll conclude this event. A follow-up email with a link to a survey will go out tomorrow morning. Please take a minute to provide your input and feedback. And thank you all for attending the Product Showcase series. We hope you found them beneficial, and have a great rest of your day. Thank you, Dylan.
Thank you.
All righty.